In this video, I'll be covering the best weapons to make in the new War Sales DLC, 29 functional weapons and 3 for making a ton of money. I've also input everything into Notion so you can see exactly what parts each weapon uses, what they sell for, all the weapon stats, and what crafting materials are required. If you're on PC, you can use this column to copy and paste the exact build into Bannerlord. Make sure you're on the correct weapon screen. If it's a two-handed sword you're making, go to the two-handed sword tab, then press Ctrl V and paste the exact blueprints. I've also included timestamps for each weapon, and now let's get to work. First, let's look at the dagger with the highest swing damage. We start with the Sika blade, which does allow us to use this in the civilian setting, so going into towns you can use it out in the field. Start with the Sika blade, maxed out all the way. Next, for the hand guard, we have a Southern Star Guard. This one is also maxed all the way out in size. For the grip, we have a half-wrapped steel reinforced bastard sword grip. This is about 80 to 85% maxed out. And then finally, we finish off with the Fiend's pommel. This one also is maxed out, and you should have a swing cut damage of 72. Let's go ahead and test out this max damage dagger, see how much damage it can actually do. So 204 damage. Granted, these are against unarmored looters, but even against people with armor, it should be able to mostly one-tap if you hit them right. And the good thing is, if you really want to use it with a shield, I guess you could. You'd most likely want to use this in combat when you're in the civilian setting. Prison breaks, sneaking around, stuff like that. So there you go. That's the dagger. It's got pretty decent swing speed. Next, we have the dagger with the highest thrust damage. We go all the way to a tier 4 blade, the broad skein blade. This one is taken down to about 20% size. For the guard, we have Southern Star Guard. This one is down to about 10% roughly. It's pretty small. And then for the handles, we have segmented leather covered arming sword grip. This one is left right around the middle. I think it's slightly less than 50%. And then the Western Great Pommel, this one's right in the middle. And if you do everything right, you should come out with about 63 pierce damage. Let's see how well this thing does in combat. So we're going to mostly focus on thrust damage. Assuming they don't block. Yeah, there you go. It's still a one tap against these guys. It's definitely less damage. And you can see the swing damage still does a decent amount at 60 to 80. But the thrust damage is definitely a one tap. And the nice thing about that is the armor is not going to block a whole lot of that. But you could see thrusting these guys is not always the easiest thing to do, even against looters. So yeah, thrust attacks are not as easy to pull off as swing attacks, that's for sure. But this thing does a tremendous amount of damage though. This could be a good sidearm if you're trying to go against armor. And we've got the highest damage javelin in the game. This one starts with the tier 5 thin fine steel hewing spearhead. This is maxed all the way out. For this piece, I believe you can use either of these two. However, if you want to get the highest sell price, you probably want to use the riveted spearhead. That's what I have selected for this. It's a tier 4 item. And then for the shaft, we have the mahogany javelin shaft. This one is also maxed all the way out. And then finally, the spiked round spear pommel. This one is not required. However, if you do add this, it increases the value, I believe, from 11k. Yeah, so 11.5 without it, and then all the way up to 15k with it. If you're only using these in combat, you do not need this. You can see the stats don't change when you switch between these. So this one is more for either cosmetics or if you're going to sell it. Now it does also increase the smithing cost. You can see here it increases the fine steel by 1. So just something to keep in mind. But that is the highest javelin that you can craft. For the javelins, we'll test against people that have shields because that's typically what you're going to want to use to counter. There you go, 1500 damage. So you could tell it does a massive amount of damage. All right, there we go. So we hit that shield and it one tapped the shield. There's 600 damage. Yeah, it's a one tap on the shield. And now we'll use it in melee just to see how it performs. 99 damage. And this guy's got decent armor. 200 to the head. There we go, 135. So this one is still half decent in melee. Finish this guy off. There you go. Another 1600 damage. So not bad at all. Up next, we've got the javelin of the budget variety. This is a tier 2 harpoon head. This one is maxed all the way out. And then the only other part here is the shaft, which is a tree branch. This is also a tier 2 part. This was increased slightly past the midway point. I'd say this is about 60%. And then you can see here it has very low cost. So 1 iron, 1 hardwood, and 1 charcoal for a value of 841. Right now we'll test the budget. I don't think these are going to do too much less damage. Yeah, it's still well over 1,000. And for a headshot, 1,500. These guys don't have quite as much armor as the damage build. but you could see it's still more than enough. Even if these guys had full armor, it wouldn't really matter. It's still a one tap. But we'll test the last one out in melee, see how well this thing does. 85 for a glancing blow on the leg, 63. So if you get a solid hit, yeah, it's still a one tap against looters anyways. I mean, against armor, it's probably going to take a few shots. As you can tell, the throwing weapon, this is the best horse armor in the game. Still did 350 damage, enough to one tap, so. Next, we've got the Mace with the highest swing damage possible. We've got Cataphract's Mace Head. It's a tier 5. This one's cranked just about up to the max and then scaled back slightly to make sure you hit that 73 swing damage. Also, similar with the Steel Horseman's Mace Handle, although this one's cranked about 80% down. And then finally, we finish off with the Fian Pommel, and this one is basically right in the center, and that should net you 73 swing blunt damage. Again, we can use a shield with this weapon, so very versatile. Does a tremendous amount of damage. You're not going to see a ton of decrease here, even going up against armor. So anywhere from 150 to 200. More than enough to one-tap anybody. You don't need two-handed to one-tap people. There you go, 224 damage. This is the Swing Speed Mace. We start off with a light Shishbar head. I've got this cranked all the way down to the minimum. For the handle, we have the Pirate Sickle handle. This one also cranked all the way down to the bottom. And then finally, the Crescent Pommel. You don't really need this. It does add a little bit of value, but you could always turn this off, and you basically have almost the same stats. And that is the Fast Swing Speed Mace. And I know this weapon looks a little ridiculous when you're actually using it. It's literally like a lollipop, but it swings fast. You just have to be really close to hit them. Not doing a ton of damage, unfortunately, but like I said, it's a mace, so it does blunt damage. So if you're going up against armored opponents, you could use it. It's a little bit of a mean build, to be honest, but it's pretty fun. There you go. That's the fastest swinging speed mace. And finally, for the one-handed mace category, we've got the weapon length maxed out. This would be very good for, say, like a cavalry build where you still need to have a shield up. Starting with the Cataphract's Mace Head, this one's maxed all the way out. The Steel Reinforced Mace Handle for the handle, it's a tier 4 item, maxed all the way out. And then finally, this piece is optional, but it does increase the value. But the Lordly Pommel, and you increase it slightly past the midway point, and that should give you an extra handling point. This one's got a weapon reach of 86. Now the idea... Oh man, I was going to say get close and try and get them to stop so you can get into melee with that, but it doesn't even matter. It's enough to one-tap them even without a lot of speed. We were basically going the same speed as them. Now, hitting grounded targets, still pretty easy because I said you've got that extra reach. And it does a lot of damage. So well over 200. And armored opponents won't fare much better than this thanks to the blunt damage. So there you go, max weapon length mace. Moving on to the one-handed axe, we start with the rectangular bit blade. This one is left roughly at middle. Oaken handle with pointy end for the handle, and this one needs to be increased a little bit, maybe up to about 65%, something like that. And then finally, all the way at the bottom, the ornamental pommel, tier 5. This one is left right in the middle. Now, this one you do have to tweak a little bit to get it up to 87 swing damage. I believe it starts off default at 84 or 85, but you should be able to get it to 87 without too much issue. And this one sells for 2,023 dinars. So you could tell this one's got a pretty good reach, so you shouldn't have too many issues hitting people. And it does one tap if they're not blocking, obviously, but these are looters. I think against armor, this would one tap most people, but maybe not everybody. But you can see this thing, not bad attack speed. There we go. For the one-handed axe with the max swing speed, we start with a tier 4 Nord throwing axe head. This one needs to be taken down to size about 20%. And then next we have the handle, it's a tier 3 Bandit scythe handle. This one size all the way down to 0. And then do not put a pommel. So make sure you do none. And that will give you a swing speed of 115 with a very small sale value of 117. But it swings really fast. Now you'll notice a pretty big difference here in how easy it is to use this thing because it attacks so fast. The AI can't really react fast enough to block. So I would say, kind of like what I did with some of the other ones, the faster attack speed might be easier if you're not quite as confident in your abilities in combat. Just get in close, keep swinging. You should be able to out-hit most everybody. There we go. Not quite one-tapping. It'll one-tap if you hit like in the head. Definitely against armor, this would not do that well. So I probably wouldn't be using this in the late game, but early game this can be pretty good. Now this one is very different from the previous guide. This is the one-handed max damage sword. It's significantly better stats than the previous one. So we're starting off with the tier 5 runed fullered long blade. This one is taken down slightly less than 50%, maybe around 40%, something like that. For the handguard, we have a tier 5 engraved hooked scimitar guard. This one is left right at 50%, the default. The handle is down here, the gold decorated leather bastard sword grip. This one also is left alone right at 50%. And then finally, braided pommel, and this one is likewise left right in the middle, so it should be pretty easy to get these stats. Maxes out at 109 swing damage. Now the previous one I believe was around 103, but all the stats got better. The swing speed is better by like 8, the reach is actually only slightly less, and the weight is like 0.5 less. It's significantly better. This weapon is so much better. I don't know if they messed up on this blade. It might need to be balanced, but hopefully they don't watch this and they just leave it alone, because this is one hell of a blade. It sells for 13,483. The only downside is it does take some Thamaskene steel, but make it and use it. It's good. Now you should see this one's got a really good reach. It's got a ton of damage, but the reach is also quite good. Look at that, 277 damage. This is going to do a little bit less damage than the two-handed sword, but you've got only one hand, so you can still use it with a shield. But this is probably one of the best weapons in the game for like a standard build. Obviously, if you're going for a two-handed build, this isn't going to work, but just insane how fast you can mop people up with this. And the swing speed isn't too terrible. Now this one I changed up from the previous guide. This is the fastest swing speed one-handed sword. This is actually not the fastest. The previous one, if you go with a much worse blade, you can get it actually quite a bit faster with the iron scimitar blade. However, you lose on a massive amount of swing cut damage, and it's also quite a bit shorter, meaning the blade was not really all that useful. But if you really want the absolute max stats, just go for the iron scimitar blade. However, we're going to cover a different one because I feel like this one is very useful. It's also able to be used in the civilian setting. This is going to use the runed blade. This one is set right towards the middle. Then for the cross guard, we've got Golden Knightly Lionhead's Guard. This one also right in the middle. The handle, golden decorated leather grips. This one also right in the middle. And finally, the Lordly Pommel we've been using quite a bit. Actually looks pretty good in this setup too. I think this is a decent look. And this one also right in the middle. And you can see we squeeze out 65 cut damage. The other one I believe is in the 40s, high 40s. So it's a significant difference. And you do lose about 8 swing speed. However, 106 is still incredibly fast. And to be able to get 65 cut damage with it, I think it's worth the compromise for this guide. You'll notice the range is quite a bit less than that two-handed, but it still packs enough punch to one-tap these looters most of the time. But the swing speed is just insanely fast. So even though you need more hits, in general, I think the battle's over much faster with the faster swing speed. I mean, it's so crazy. Yep. And I don't even know if I can get this thing to go chain strike because it's so fast. Good weapon. Let's talk about the one-handed sword, the budget build. This one is going to need a lot less crafting materials. You can see here it has no Thamaskene steel need. However, it's only 6 damage less swing cut damage than the best swing cut damage that we showed in the other one. So let's go through this one. Starting with a tier 5 long Falx blade. This one is left basically in the middle. I think it's slightly just a tiny nudge to the left a little bit. The handguard is the tier 5 etched Highland guard. This one is all the way down to 0. The handle is the Eastern leather covered reinforced two-handed grip. And again, this one I think is slightly to the left or it's right in the middle. I can't remember, but it's very close to the middle. And then finally, the Fiend's pommel. This one is increased a little bit max size. So you should be able to get this to about 102. And then if you bring it up here to about 70-75%, you should be able to get it to tick over to 103. You can see here if I just barely move it, there's like this little spot here, but it'll go to 103. Yeah, very comparable stats to the best swing damage in the game, but you need no Thamaskene steel and it's worth half the cost. So it's definitely a good budget build if you don't want to go all the way up to Thamaskene. Now I think we'll find a happy medium middle ground here with the budget build. It's definitely slower, but it packs quite a bit of punch. I would say just almost as much as the highest damage. But the problem with this one is you lack a thrusting attack. So if you're fighting in close quarters, you're going to have one less option for attacking people. This one is also good against shields because it's a Falx. But you can see it's definitely slower than the attack speed. It takes a little bit longer to clear people out, but if you hit anything, it's pretty much a one-hit kill. Now here's another one. I decided to switch it up just a little bit from the previous guide. This one is maxing out for the pike damage, the thrust damage. Obviously, we're not going to look at swing damage because that's kind of ridiculous on a pike. You generally want to have high thrust damage and spear brace damage. So in this case, we are starting with the pike head, which is actually a Nord weapon tip. It is not in the previous patch, so this is Warsail specific. We maxed the length out, and then down here, the same shaft, it's the hard maple pike shaft, and this one is also maxed out. So the previous build was quite a bit heavier. I believe 3.0. Weapon reach was just under 300. It was about 299, so we give up a little more than 20 weapon reach, but we pick up a faster thrust speed and a significant increase in damage. Previous damage was around 40. This one's 51. So quite a bit better here and slightly more handling. And then value, who cares? You don't craft these things for value anyways. But this should do quite a bit more damage and you're barely giving up a little bit of reach. So hopefully this one works out well for you. Let's talk about using the pike here. So if you stop moving and you press X, that puts you in the pike position, the spear brace. If you press caps lock, you can move around slowly. If you turn off caps lock and you're running, it automatically cancels your movement. So that's how you use the spear brace. So if you want to actually use it like this, but you need to adjust slightly, just make sure you press caps lock so that you're no longer running and you can walk with it like this. So obviously this is not a good weapon for fighting hand to hand against foot troops, but it's going to be a real struggle to get all these guys off your back. Let them beat us here. But yeah, very, very good weapon against cavalry. As you can see, it was a one tap against that one and very easy to aim. Up next, the throwing axe for max damage. Now this one saw quite a bit of improvement. The previous damage was around, I believe, 90 damage. This one, you can get all the way up to 131. So it might actually be worth crafting some of these, especially considering how cheap it is to make, but we'll cover that in a sec. Start off with a tier 3 Nord battle throwing axe head. This one is cranked all the way to 100% size. And then for the handle, the leather bound swift handle. This one, crank it all the way to 100 and peel it back maybe 5 to 10%. And then you should see it tick over to 131 damage. If you move a little bit either way, it will go to 130. So just make sure you hit that sweet spot. And as I said before, this one only requires 2 wrought iron and 2 iron. So very, very cheap to make these, and they actually are worth 7,400. So this could actually be a big moneymaker, as well as decent for using in combat with 131 damage. All right, we're testing the max damage throwing axes here. There we go. It's a one tap against the guy mounted. Against the shield, it's a one tap, and then a second one to take him out. 668 damage is quite a lot. So there you go, 914 for a headshot. And if you have to use it in melee, so if you press X, it'll switch it into melee mode. These things do a decent amount of damage, but the thing is their attack speed is really good. It's one of those weapons where you could easily take 3 or 4 stacks, depending if you want a shield or not. Just save your last one and use it in melee, because like I said, it's quite effective in melee, and it's devastating at range. The only problem is these things are a little bit harder to aim, so I would probably still prefer the Javelin. But if you're doing a Viking theme, this can be an incredible weapon to use. And another new entry for this year, the throwing axe moneymaker. I just realized how crazy this is. So if you go with a tier 3 Nord battle throwing axe head, this one requires only 2 wrought iron and 2 iron, 1 hardwood and 1 charcoal. Leave the size alone for the axe head. And then if you can get to a tier 5 handle, you'll make more money. But even the tier 1 handles, you can see they still make decent money, 2,700. And then you go up in value at tier 4, you can get 5,100. But if you can get up to this tier 4 or tier 5, the tier 5 handle is the best because it only requires 1 hardwood. You can see the tier 4 requires 3, so it's even cheaper. And then max this bad boy out, and you'll go from 8,000 up to 8664. Now this literally costs you 4 pieces of very cheap metal, 1 wood, 1 charcoal, and you can make an absolute killing with these things. So this is definitely going to be a good money maker. The throwing dagger actually has a bit more use now with the stealth mechanics. So this is the one maxed out for damage. And this one was changed from the previous guide. They've added a throwing knife blade. This is a tier 4 blade. Crank this all the way to the max size. A tier 3 handguard, the knobbed diamond dagger guard, crank that all the way to 100%. The handle is going to be a tier 1 handle. This is the best one. Somehow I guess they didn't balance this properly, but crank that all the way to the max size as well. And then finally, we have the bulbous saber pommel. This one you can take up to about 85 to 80% of the max size, and you should see it tick over to 78 missile pierce damage. The previous set that I had crafted was around 44, I think, so it's nearly double the amount of damage. So they really increased the output of damage for this, and it's a little costly to craft because it does require fine steel, but it's a good set for sure. But typically you would use this in a civilian setting, but I'm going to show you here against the looters just because I've already got the save set up. You can see a headshot is going to do 900 damage, body shot still 360, so incredible damage. And in melee, very fast attack speed, but you have to be almost point blank, basically touching their character model to actually land a hit. Not always a one tap, but it's okay damage. I would definitely not rely on this in melee though, but you know, in a pinch, you can use it. So you can see here, very, very good weapon to use. Now moving on to the two-handed axe, as this one is the most damage. It is slightly different from the previous guide, so we are using the tier 4 Nord two-handed axe head. This one is taken all the way up to max and then backed off just a little bit, maybe 85% of max. We've got the handle, the hardened oaken two-handed axe handle. This one is left at right in the middle. And then finally we finish off with a tier 5 piece, the Eastern decorated pommel. This one is taken down to about 15 to 20% of the max size, and you should be able to get it up to 143 swing cut damage. Now the previous one had 141, so it's only 2 damage more. However, the weapon reach is actually bigger. The weight is slightly less. Everything else is the same. So you just pick up a little bit more stats than what you previously had in the other guide. Now we're going to test the two-handed axe against some shields. So one tap. There we go. It's going to take maybe 2 hits to take that shield up. There we go. So you can see it cut through the horse and the rider. This can be pretty good anti-cav, even if you're not able to get a good direct hit on the rider. Just cut through the horse. So as long as you're swinging chest height, you can take out cav with the horse at the same time because of the cut through. Let's talk about the two-handed axe with maximum length. Now this one is slightly different from the previous guide. They removed some items and added some new ones. So let's talk about what we got. A tier 5 heavy bardiche head. This one is taken up to maximum size. The handle is the hardened oaken two-handed axe handle. This one is also taken to max size. And then we finish it off with the tier 5 Themyscene steel riveted spear pommel. This one you can leave in the middle, it doesn't matter. Now we did lose a little bit of stats from the previous one. The handle used to be on this list and is no longer on the list, so we swapped it out. It's a little bit less stats, but not that big of a deal. The value is at 5,500, however it does cost you 1 Themyscene steel. So if you really didn't want to spend that Themyscene, you could drop this one. It doesn't really change the stats that much, it just sells for less. So that would be a way of making this slightly cheaper, but there you go. Testing our two-handed axe. Maximum length. So for mounted combat, you could see it's got incredible reach, pretty easy to catch people and tag them in the back. If they have a shield, it's usually about 1 to 2 hits to break the shield. Incredibly easy to hit people with this thing. We hit, yeah, there we go. We got 2 kills with 1 hit. So let's dismount, see how this thing performs on foot. Yeah, it's a 1 tap. And that's on foot. If you're on horse, you're going to get more of a speed bonus. Just don't let them get too close to you because they will crowd your damage. And then you'll end up relying on your handling, and the handling on this thing's not that great. So you do have to have pretty good accuracy to use it. But there you go. Not bad at all. Next, we've got two-handed axe, maxing swing speed. Now, this one is slightly different from the previous guide as well. The drilled Sparth axe was moved and the stats were changed. So now the fastest head is the large drill Norse bearded head. This one you want to take all the way down to minimum size. We still find the tier 1 long gnarled ash shaft to be the best for this. There's actually a tier 5 one that has similar stats, but you can see it's actually not as good. For some reason, you get better stats with the tier 1 than the tier 5 that has kind of similar swing speed, but you pick up more stats in the other areas. So whatever, the tier 1's the best. Don't put a pommel, just leave it on none, otherwise you'll lose some swing speed. But you can see here, it sells for almost nothing. It's probably not worth crafting for selling, but it can be very good because 108 swing speed on a weapon that has cut through is very good to have. Now the swing speed one is pretty good with the axe. The only thing is your cut through damage is going to be a little bit less, but you can see it's a 1 tap if you hit somebody solid right around the 150 mark, and you could just spam attacks at this thing. But like I said, you're not going to hit as many cut throughs. The problem is the range is quite a bit smaller, so it's hard to hit multiple people with it, and then on top of that, it doesn't do as much damage. So the first cut through takes away quite a bit of your damage, and fighting against cav with this thing is really challenging, but it can still be done. That was a one tap just barely with 103 damage to the legs. So this one is ideal for large infantry combat. I would definitely not use this against anything mounted. We've got the two-handed mace maxing out for damage. This one is slightly different from the previous guide. However, it uses the same tier 4 heavy long flanged mace head. This one is taken down in size to about 20%. And instead of the iron reinforced shaft, I went with the hardened oaken two-handed axe handle. This actually gives us better reach for very similar stats than the others. So you can see this one is taken down slightly less than 50%, maybe 40 to 45%. And then we finish it off with a pommel. The previous one did not have a pommel. The southern faceted pommel, we pick up some extra handling and swing speed, I think, by adding this. So this one brings our stats to the same 85 swing blunt damage, but we pick up a lot of reach. The other one had, I think, 114. This one's 140. Swing speed is still reasonable, handling's okay, and the sell price of 5,600 is not terrible, although it does use fine steel, so probably better for using than mass producing for sale. Now this one I know has really good crush through. Yeah, look at that. So even if they block, as long as you're at the decent range, you're going to hit that crush through, and it's a one tap. If you don't hit the crush through, it's doing 226 damage, and that's blunt. So even if they had armor, it wouldn't really reduce much, and you can see you're still getting multiple hits. So there's 2 kills with 1 swing. This is a really good alternative to the two-handed axe. But there you go, two-handed mace, max damage. Next, the two-handed mace optimized for length. This is ideal for mounted combat. We are starting with the tier 3 Eastern heavy mace head, maxed all the way out. And we'll talk about this in just a second, but you could go with a different mace head. For the handle, we've got the hardened oaken two-handed axe handle maxed out. And I don't put a pommel on this one because it just adds weight. It does add a little bit of damage, but when you're using a mounted mace, you probably don't need to maximize damage as much as you need to maximize your weapon reach and your swing speed. That'll make it easier to actually hit your target, and the momentum from your horse will do extra damage to your target. You don't need the extra damage when you're mounted, so that's why I went with this. However, if you want to maximize your damage, you would go with the heavy, long flanged mace head and max it out. You can see here the swing blunt damage goes up to 75, and it's essentially the same weapon reach. This one's 59 versus this at 58. So this one you can pick up some more blunt damage, but you can see your swing speed is quite a bit slower. Your handling's less, and I feel like it's actually harder to use, whereas this one you'll be able to snipe people a little bit easier because of the extra swing speed, and even if your aim is not perfect, the handling will help you pick up the difference. So hopefully that makes sense, but either one you can't go wrong with. So as you can see, the distance on this thing is insane. It's so much easier to hit people. If you have one of the shorter ones that do either more damage or faster swing speed, it's pretty hard to hit stuff with this. When you're doing mounted combat, you really want to have distance. There we go. And then you can line this up perfectly, smack them right in the head. And then I'm going to dismount here and see how we can do. So if you get knocked off your horse, you can still use this thing. Here we go. Somebody with the shield. It takes the shield down in 3 hits. That's actually pretty good. We hit. Oh, that hit all 3 of them. There we go. So you might even use this to replace the damage one. It's not that bad on foot, but I still would probably stick to the damage one on foot, but this is an incredible mace to use while mounted. Next, the two-handed mace for swing speed. This one did see some changes. They removed one of the mace heads. Now the best one for swing speed is the heavy Morningstar head. This one is taken all the way down to 0 size. The shaft is the iron-topped two-handed mace handle taken all the way down to 0, and make sure you do not have a pommel to make sure your weight and your swing speed is maxed out. This should have you swinging at 105, doing 48 damage, and selling for $6.99. Not really a great one to sell, but it can be really good if you need that extra swing speed. Again, this one was made slightly worse because they removed some items that were really good, but it's still decent. I would say probably worth still using. This swings quite a bit faster than the previous one, so it's a little bit easier to hit shots with this thing. However, you'll notice it doesn't instantly one-tap everybody automatically, but it is so much easier to use. I would say if you're a veteran player, you could probably get away with the damage one. If you're more of a newer player or just not that confident in your combat, we'd probably use this one. It's so much easier to use because you don't have to time everything perfectly. But there you go. You can see this one has a pretty fast attack speed. Next, let's talk about the polearm that can be couch lanced and is maximized for thrust pierce damage. Now this one I have changed up quite significantly from the previous guide. We are starting off with one of the new blades. This is the Pike head. This is one of the Nord designs. it is taken up to about 65% increase in size. And for the guard, we have the rectangular banner. This one is also taken up to about, I don't know, 85% size. And then the reinforced long pine shaft is a tier 3. This one's taken it also up to about 85%. Essentially, what I've tried to do is increase the size as much as I can without losing any thrust pierce damage. So if you go down just a tiny bit, you lose 1, down to 41. So I basically kept these as big as I could to keep that 42 thrust damage. Now for the pommel, you don't have to have a pommel. It literally makes no difference in terms of the stats. If we take it off, the only thing that changes is the value. I think it looks kind of cool with some of these new ones. I've got the speary decorated pommel, and then the size doesn't matter on this one. Like I said, this one's more for looks. If you don't care about looks, just take it off. You'll save yourself some crafting materials. This one sells for 3,698, which is not bad for a thrust only. Typically, the ones that are swingable sell for a lot more, so that's pretty surprising. But essentially, we pick up a massive weapon reach of 281, which is important if you're planning on using couch lance or thrust attacks while you're mounted. So this is a pretty big change from the previous one. Hopefully this one helps you guys. We are testing the couch lance first. And you can see it's pretty easy to aim. It's got decent range. Obviously, you need a fast horse to be able to catch people, but if you go head on, it's still pretty easy to use, assuming you don't get blasted by javelins. There we go. So 562 damage, more than enough to one-tap anybody in whatever armor they're wearing. Now let's try just regular thrusts. So good weapon. Obviously, you'd want to be careful around ranged units, but as a couch lance, it definitely fulfills its purpose. Up next, we've got a polearm that's used while mounted, and this one specifically is for maxing out swing damage. Now, we want a decent length, so we capped it at 200, so it's not too long that's going to get stuck on everything, but long enough to where you can actually use it while mounted. Starting off with the tier 5 long glaive head. This one is maxed out in size. Next, we've got the double hooked wings. This one is taken down to 0 size. For the shaft, we have a hardened ashen shaft. This one's taken down to about 15 to 20% size. And then finally at the bottom, another tier 5 spiked and polygonal pommel. This one is not necessary. However, if you want to add it to sell or have it look nice, you add it. If you're only using this item and you don't care what it looks like, go ahead and remove it and just do none. And that'll cut down on some of your costs. But you can see this one has a pretty high sell price of nearly 18,000 for the cost of 4 fine steel, so not bad at all. But this one has quite a bit more. You gotta make sure you put your shield away, but quite a bit more range. You can see it's very easy to hit stuff from really long distance. Does an incredible amount of damage, but you do have to still be careful with ranged weapons, and it still stabs pretty hard. 146 for a stab, and that was a pierce damage to the arm, so it wasn't even a headshot. So you could see, like always, not effective against ranged units if there's too many of them and you're by yourself, but very good going after other cav. Next, let's cover the polearm that is good for swinging on foot. So not quite maximizing swing damage, but kind of getting a good overall stat base. Starting with the long glaive head. This one is taken all the way down to 0 size. The double hook wings, tier 5, all the way down to 0 size. We use the pine shaft. This one is about 25%, 20 to 25% size. And then the same thing as before, the pommel doesn't matter for spears. If you want a good looking one or higher value, put one on. I use the spiked round spear pommel, but really it doesn't matter. If you take it off, the stats are going to be unchanged other than the value. And so this one has a decent swing speed while maintaining 175 weapon reach. So it's not too long where you're going to get caught in everybody. It's not too short where you have to get into really close range to actually hit somebody, but it does a massive amount of damage at 182. This one has a pretty decent range at 175. You can still see it does an incredible amount of damage. Unfortunately, crush through is not really a thing with this, but decent swing speed. You can make longer ones, but I feel like less than 200 is the ideal when you're on foot. So 175 I think is a decent compromise. You can even go shorter, maybe take a little more swing speed, but for me personally, this is where it's at. So there you go. Pretty obviously a solid weapon. I decided to add another moneymaker, this time in the polearm category, and this one is actually done earlier in the run. You only need tier 2 parts, and it only costs 1 crafting material, 1 wrought iron, 1 hardwood, and 1 charcoal. So 3 across the board, but literally 1 piece of metal to do the whole thing. So we start with a tier 2 bill head. Leave it on default. If you move it around, you'll actually lose value. And then the only other thing you need is a tier 2 bamboo shaft. Again, leave it in the middle. Don't touch it. If you move it, you will lose value. But this thing will sell for 2,240 dinars and literally cost you almost nothing. So this is probably even better than the one I have in the two-handed sword category. However, you can do both. It doesn't really matter. You're going to make infinite money with either one. Now, I don't know if this is a bug or not. We're going to talk about the two-handed sword max swing damage. So this particular blade seems to be bugged because there's nothing even remotely close to it. It's like 50 damage more than the next closest tier 5 blade. So if this gets patched, I'm sorry, I'm not going to redo the video, but right now this is definitely the one to make. So the tier 5 runed fuller long blade, this one should be maxed out. For the handle or the guard, we have the Southern Star Guard tier 4. Take that all the way to max. And then this one is still the best grip in the game. It's a tier 2 long hide grip. They still haven't patched this, thank God. This one gives you a massive amount of stats, including a ton of swing damage, and it's only a tier 2. And then finally, the Fian Pommel, it's a tier 5. That one, you can take it up to about 70 to 80%, and that will give you the max 192 swing damage without sacrificing some of these other stats. So this one has 192 swing cut damage, which is absolutely insane. The other weapon I had in the previous guide, I think was a 150 or 160s. It's literally like 25 or 30% higher. So I think this might be bugged. They might have done this wrong in the DLC. So hopefully they don't patch it. Tailwolves, if you're watching this, plug your ears, close your eyes, don't look at it. Just leave it alone. The value for sale is 11,234. This is a very good weapon to build if you can get Themyscene Steel. At max damage, it's going to have no problem cutting through a bunch of people. You can see 560 damage. It can also cut through multiple opponents, and it can crush through. This thing dominates. It's not the fastest swing speed, so I would probably be a little bit careful with this if you're not quite as skilled in melee combat. But in the right hands, this thing can clean up. Now, just like the swing damage, we're covering the thrust damage, and this one has most likely a bug. The Runed Fuller Long Blade has stats that are just way above anything else, so this is probably going to get patched. Hopefully it doesn't, but we're starting with that one. That's a tier 5 Runed Fuller Long Blade. This one you take down to about 15 to 20% size. And for the Handguard Thick Silvered Warsword Guard, this one you can leave slightly less than 50%. Or the grip, we have Tapered Horn Grip, and this one I believe is right in the middle at 50%, so you could just leave that at default. And then the pommel is the Runed Pommel tier 5. This one you can leave in the middle as well. And you should be able to maintain a 74 thrust pierce damage and the thrust speed of 96, which is really, really fast. This one also has a pretty high sell price of 17,442, so not too bad. Now, like in some of the other testing, I think thrusting damage is a little bit harder to get through because they seem to block more. But when you hit, it does an incredible amount of damage. And as I said, thrust damage is not blocked by armor quite as much. And it's also really good to use in close quarter combat if you can actually get a hit off. Now, it still does pretty good damage as a swing weapon. So pairing it with a kick might be the only way you can get it to work. There we go. Let's talk about the budget two-handed sword. Now, the reason it's a budget sword is because it does not use any Themyscene steel, but still has amazing stats. So you can see here the highest crafting materials required is 3 fine steel. Not too bad. Starting with the blade, we have a tier 5 long fox blade. This is taken up to the maximum size. Now, this blade used to be a tier 4. They've now upgraded it to a tier 5, so you do have to unlock more parts to get to it. However, they did not increase the cost of the crafting goods, so still a good budget blade. For the handguard, we're going to go with the tier 1 knobbed iron guard. This one adds a significant amount of swing cut damage for a handguard. The grip, we see a return of the long hide grip. This one's one of the best ones in the game for swing cut damage, so we're going with that one, and it's also cheap to make. And finally, the tier 1 globe pommel. Again, this one adds a decent amount of cut damage. Now, we still maintain a swing speed of 90, so it is still decent in terms of being able to use it realistically in combat. And also, it sells for a half decent amount, 5,200, without requiring any Themyscene steel. Now, this one should be a fair compromise between the swing damage and the cut damage. You can see it's not doing 500 like max damage. And it's definitely not as fast as the swing speed one, but it is a very, very good weapon. Do not sleep on this weapon. Unfortunately, they did change it so that you have to be a higher tier to craft the blade, but if you can get here and you don't want to farm up Themyscene, this is probably the way to go. Moving on to the two-handed sword for maxing swing speed. This one is starting with a tier 5 blade. This is the runed short blade, so this is the shorter version of the one that I was talking about earlier. This one I don't think is bugged. I think this one's fine. It's only slightly faster than the one we had on the previous one. But anyways, this one is taken all the way down to 0 size. For the handguard, we have a tier 5 knobbed bronze guard taken all the way down to 0. For the handle, go back to tier 4. This is a red leathered one-handed grip. This one also at 0 size. And then finally, we have a tier 4 pommel, the 3-branch pommel, taken down to 0 size. This will get you up to 118 swing speed. The previous was 117, but it only had 72 reach. This one's 80 reach, so more swing speed, quite a bit more reach, so it should be even more of a useful weapon. The swing cut damage isn't incredible at 74, but if you've got high enough skill, you should be able to hit people before they even are able to block. So very good weapon to use. Probably not worth much to sell. It does require a little bit of Damascene steel, but it's a fun one. It's probably one of my favorite weapons to use. The sword is really satisfying, and because it's max swing speed, you could just slice through people very, very quickly. The only downside is the range is a little bit short. Just about everything's a one tap, and we just got shot in the head. But definitely a solid weapon to use. Let's talk about the two-handed sword maximized for length. This is particularly useful when fighting mounted. Starting off with a tier 5 fullered long warsword blade. You can also replace this with the ruined fullered long blade if you want the one with the huge cut damage. It's only one weapon reach less. I decided to put a different one on here in case they patch that one. At least not all my weapons are going to be completely trashed. So fullered long warsword, still pretty good stats. And then this one needs to be taken up to the maximum size. Next, we have the bronze Falx guard. This one is taken up to maximum size as well. The tier 2 handle, this is my favorite, the long hide grip. This one's taken to max. And then finally, keeping with the theme of mounted combat, we've got a tier 5 horsehead pommel. This one can be taken down to the minimum size so you could pick up a little more swing speed. So we're going to get 145 weapon reach. It's not the absolute longest, but it does quite a bit of damage, has a very reasonable swing speed. It's just an overall well-rounded weapon, but particularly good mounted because of the reach. It also sells for 12,305, although it does cost 4 Damascene steel, so something to consider. You can see here, even though the armor on the horse was pretty high, we were able to cut through the horse and the rider, and because the length is good, didn't really have too much of an issue reaching him. And there's 2 kills, 1 swing. And let's go ahead and see how this thing performs on foot. It should be quite a bit slower, but not that bad. Thrust damage is solid. Not ideal at breaking shields, but it can do it. And there you go. So I think this is a pretty solid blade. Even if you wanted to use this on foot, I think you could get away with doing it as opposed to the max damage. This is a good one. And finally, the two-handed sword that I would personally recommend if you're trying to make money, this is the one to go with because it has a very high value relative to the amount of crafting materials that it requires to make. You can see here we have a tier 4 pointed falchion blade. They still haven't fixed this. It's been in the game for like 3-4 years now. It's a tier 4 blade that only requires 3 wrought iron. It's absolutely ridiculous. All the other items are the default ones that you start with, so you don't even need to change anything. Just go with the falchion blade. You can make it bigger, smaller. Smaller actually makes you more money, so I would probably make it smaller, 5,600 versus the default 55. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. You're going to make an absolute killing because it only costs you 6 wrought iron. You could probably spend less than 1,000 dinars and get a bunch of this. So easy money. I expect they haven't changed it in the previous guide when I put basically the same thing. I don't expect them to fix it this time, so hopefully they leave it alone and we can all make a ton of money. Don't forget, you can access the Notion page for the database with all weapons. Link is in the description. It's free for everyone to use, but please consider supporting the channel further through YouTube memberships or Patreon. These types of projects are a massive undertaking and don't really earn as much money as other types of videos, so any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.